Alright guys, Scrappy again. I hope you're doing well and enjoying your day. So far, OpTic pseudo general manager Anthony Zinni gives his perspective on the recent announcement that Alluka will be joining FaZe, and they did pull the trigger after all the speculation in recent weeks. He says that from the OpTic perspective, they've got a proven roster. They've just won back-to-back championships at the end of the last season. With this team, they don't need another inexperienced player like Alluka on the sub-bench, but that logic does not apply to many other teams in this league. FaZe being one of them, potentially others could have made this move as well. Will it come back to bite them? Very much on Twitter, your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Just another couple of quick updates as we move here into 2026. Hope you all had a good start to the new year at least. And as, well, OpTic Texas say, a year we'll never forget. We're going to get back to this roster that won back-to-back championships in a second. The other update as of last night, December the 31st, was on FaZe Clan. So we got another one. Another scalp is gone. At this point, I'm not really sure it matters in a sense. FaZe Clan is cooked. Everyone's left. You know, all the big names. Zuma's still there, but on the FaZe Esports side, that also applies to K-Sum. But basically all the other big names left over the last few days. The only two that were still remaining, now it's worth noting if you go to the FaZe Clan page, you look at following, the number is 0, right? So as far as FaZe Clan seem to be concerned, and they also did the announcement which effectively said it's over. So it doesn't seem like FaZe, at least from FaZe's perspective, have any members anymore. But there were still 2 members that had not yet announced anything. Zuma didn't exactly announce anything, but on stream he took FaZe Clan out of his bio and basically said, okay, it's over, but going to be working with the FaZe Esports side from now on. But Scope, who was one of the 2 remaining, says, what a pleasure it was. Thanks so much for having me, but officially left FaZe, which only leaves now 1 man remaining in FaZe. And again, as I say, from FaZe's perspective, whoever's calling the shots over there, I don't think Jev is a member anymore. But from Jev's perspective, well, he's not left exactly. He's still got FaZe Clan in the bio. So maybe just leave it there and it doesn't really matter, right? He's not FaZe Jev on his name anyway. But he did put this tweet out. It's kind of funny because he's just pretended that none of it's happened, which is probably typical, really. And as he says, playing the Elden Ring thing, Elden Ring bosses no longer faze me at all. So I can't imagine that this is just a coincidence that he puts in this, they no longer faze me. So yeah, I don't know. What does that mean to me? No longer faze me, as in I'm no longer in FaZe? Possible. Intrigue to your thoughts in the comments. But as it stands, Jev seems like the final man remaining in the whole FaZe drama. But speaking of FaZe, the first matchup back for both OpTic and FaZe in the new year is this one between both teams. So on the 10th of January at 8 PM UK time, OpTic play Vegas. Definitely could well be a banger on paper. Of course, last season OpTic played Vegas a couple of times. It was the Vegas Falcons. This time it's FaZe Vegas. And yeah, excited to see OpTic versus FaZe happening again, especially to crack on really with the start of the new year. And, well, OpTic will be the favourites for this series. FaZe will have their roster, which is under more pressure now than it has been before because of the situation with the substitutes. And we'll get into that again in a couple of seconds. Before we get there, I did want to show a couple of clips of Neptune, actually. Well, this is an Octane clip talking about Neptune because Neptune has also been a key conversation point when it comes to FaZe, right? They could have signed him if they'd wanted, probably. At least they could have tried. But FaZe didn't seem were particularly interested in getting Neptune. They were more interested in getting 0-4 instead from that roster. There has been a lot of talk actually about whether those Surge guys really ended up where they should have done this season. There is a good argument that maybe FaZe should have got Neptune instead of 0-4. There's still going to be some debate on that. I'm not going to count out. I think 0-4's a pretty damn good player. He may work out well with Simp as well. There would have been questions if it had been Simp and Neptune as the sub-duo. But obviously in terms of like raw slaying potential impact, you could see why that could be viable. There were some potential concerns from FaZe's side that, oh, Neptune's, snaking his own team. He's talking behind the scenes to other orgs to try and get signed before the season's over. But, like, everyone on that Surge team knew it was chalked. They weren't getting paid any money anyway. I don't blame Neptune for team hopping a little bit or team shopping a little bit before last season was over. And they still did well at the end of the season, making the grand finals that they did. I think the question for many is on Nasty, really, because some are saying, and I also see this logic, that, well, could Thieves have gone for Nasty? They tried to get Celium, that didn't happen. They tried to get Drazah, at least as far as we understand. That didn't happen because he didn't want to play with Scrap. Then the third option became Kenny. Should Kenny have been the third option, right? Look, I'm still not counting out Thieves just yet. As I say, we'll discuss them more in a second with this Alluka drama. But I do think there would have been an argument to say, well, Nasty's played with Thieves before. He's absolutely one of the best flexes on the market coming off that Surge team. And like, of those teams that blow up, that do very well, someone always gets the short end of the stick. In this case, it was arguably Nasty going to Boston. Still think Boston could be pretty good, but and he's also looked really good on this game so far anyway. So there has been a bit of talk, maybe at the time less so, but certainly in hindsight to say, could Thieves have gone for Nasty? Would that have been an option? Would Neptune have got paid more money by Gentleman's if he had more opportunities on the table, right? Not to say that Neptune might not have ended up there anyway, because I think the Gentlemates have done a good job putting together the roster they have. But if Neptune had tons of offers from, you know, FaZe and the other teams potentially in the conversation too, maybe he would have been in a better position. So Octane says, I still don't think Neptune's getting enough gas. He's frying. This was an outrageous clip. One of the most insane, I think, of BO7 so far. I mean, look at this poor fellow. He gets absolutely world starred. So, I mean, look, you know we can do this on Black Ops 7. We've seen clips like this before from Huke on, I think it was Exposure. We saw a couple of clips like this. But this one is pretty outrageous, right? I mean, this poor guy just gets bounced all over him. He's spinning around doing like a 720-degree turn, and it's still not going to make any difference. So, yeah, that's the type of stuff we're going to see. Does it change how Raid plays? Absolutely. But this is part of the game, right? And definitely one of the clips, I think, that we look back on the season that will sum up Black Ops 7 to a certain extent. But speaking of FaZe, the team, of course, that Neptune could have potentially joined, they signed Alluka officially the other day, and there have been questions whether that was either the right call for Alluka or whether it was the right call for other teams. I think for FaZe, it seems to be a no-brainer to me, and Zinni will explain why in a second. Their team is relatively unproven. We don't really know how good they're going to be. Alluka may or may not be one of the next superstars. You know, he may be a mainstay of the league over the coming years. And if he is, having him on FaZe now is an absolute no-brainer. You put pressure on the starting roster. Equally, if your starting team does very well, but Alluka continues to fry in challenges, you might be able to sell him to a different organization at some point. For FaZe, you know, I think it makes sense. For Alluka, there were some questions. Are FaZe going to be good? What if they beat OpTic in a few days' time? They, you know, go on and win the major like FaZe did last year at this time, where they weren't great before Christmas, then they locked in and became really good. Obviously a different team now with different players, so I think that's less likely. But it's not impossible that FaZe turn it around and Alluka's sitting there on the sidelines for the rest of the year when maybe he could have been needed elsewhere. So for Alluka there were some questions, I think, but also for some of the other teams. Should there have been more of a bidding war? Because ever since we saw rumours from Ronnie that FaZe were interested, it took them a while to get this deal maybe finalised or to get everything signed off and secured. So there was probably a window where other teams could have competed, right? There was other interest. I mean, Omid Rafi said that like 6 teams had inquired. So there was definitely interest. But presumably those were from some of the lower teams such as Surge. They needed a change. They were like, oh, can we get Alluka? That wasn't really going to happen. Alluka wouldn't have wanted to really go to some of those teams, I'm sure, that are interested. But could some other top teams have also had a consideration in this matter? Now, Method says that from OpTic's perspective, this didn't really make much sense. Now, Zinni, of course, believes Alluka's pretty damn good. Many of the pro players who have watched this guy sin the eye test are on board with that assessment. But of course, then the logic is, okay, well, why didn't OpTic sign him, right? Why not bring him on as a sub, and then nobody else can get him, right? And maybe there's some logic behind that, but as Method says, from OpTic's side, there's really no reason. They've picked up their inexperienced rookie in Mercules last year. Look what he's gone on to do. They've now got a team which isn't going anywhere, proven world champions back-to-back at the end of the season, and they're still looking great on this game so far as well. So from OpTic's side, needing a player like Alluka, it's just not required, right? I mean, he also kind of plays Mercules' role, so that's not going to be changing anytime soon. So from OpTic's side, sure, makes sense, but Method's logic is like, well, look, if you've got an unproven team, and he also describes it as like day and night, right? The situation that OpTic are in, the situation that FaZe are in. So if it makes sense for FaZe, which I think it does, then could it also have made sense for a team like Thieves?
Dude, I know Trav. I know.
Slash lowest person I've ever met in my life.
Snade, right?
Bro, I still don't think he gets enough gas, and that's insane. That's like an insane thing to say after last year, but I still don't think he gets enough gas. Watching that guy play last year was absurd, and he's just as good this year.
I'd probably say Dill and Dan enable the most in game, but I think I probably enable the most out of game. Probably.
Sound like it.
I don't see none chat. Them no motherfuckers way. Oh. Damn, he just got shit on.
Oh my god. Running up with you guys. I'll help you left, Mel.
Those left. Bro, you are so bad. Like, no.
One's on point, one's on there,
yeah,
one's on P5.
Dirt pillar, dirt pillar, Mel. Rone shot. Nice.
Oh,
I'm trying to couch. Couches.
Two garage.
Two garage.
And then do couches. I took him again.
In the back, pillar. No, that's a good nade.
I don't need you. He's one shot. Geo.
Bang my nade on the pillar. Watch out.
Backside Tom.
Awakening.
I'm aping this. One off this.
Nice. In the back. Oh my god.
I'm licking couches.
Couches.
I'm moving like LeBron James.
Couches.
Nice. I have your help in the back.
Those couches.
Back door. Oh my god, couches.
We'll probably talk a little bit more about.
You think he's so good? Why didn't you pick him up? Well, we're comparing night and day here. One team is a proven back-to-back championship roster, and one team is an unproven team that changes for the first time in 5 years and isn't a known quantity.
Worth thinking a little about the concept of substitutes in general in the CDLO for the last few years, because when the league first came around in Modern Warfare 2019, there was a mandatory 7-man roster minimum. I think Toronto had like 10 players on their team, but there was a mandatory 7-man roster because you had to have 5 starters and then 2 substitutes. Now, famously, there were a number of interesting substitutes that season, such as even the Chicago Huntsmen at the time. They had Embos and General. They were their 2 subs. OpTic Gaming Los Angeles, fake OpTic, they had, what was it, Chino and Goonjar were their 2 subs. Even now, OpTic Maniac, Nick Kirshner, he was on Florida Mutineers as their substitute, right? So it was all going on that season. And at the time that was mandated, right, you needed to have a roster of that size. Now, that's not been the case over the last few years. What the teams have now done, like this image from FaZe, is they've put Crowder here, who is at the top, and they've got RJ on their left-hand side. No Alluka in this image, because I imagine they made this before Alluka was in the team, or they've not got a picture like this with Alluka yet, understandably so. But regardless, the teams have had opportunities to put their coaches down as substitutes. And look, if you've got a former pro player, if you've got a Karma, if you've got maybe a Rambo, if you've got a Crowder in this case, and others as well, and many, of course, former coach or coaches are former players. So it's not always the end of the world. If there was to be a freak incident where you needed someone to sub in and it had to be the coach, it can work. It's, very rare that it happens though, right? Which is why the teams over the last few years have thought, well, do I really need to pay the extra 50k, effectively minimum salary, to have a substitute if I can just put my coach down in that role? And things have changed quite dramatically. So nowadays, a few years ago in the league, everyone had a sub. It was mandated. Now, even after it was no longer quite so mandated, many teams still kept them. But this most recent season, barely any teams have proper substitutes. Now, FaZe have always quite liked to have a substitute. They had Pristini, I think, for a little while. They had Classic for some time as well. So FaZe like to have someone on their bench. And the benefit is that if that player is, in Alluka's case, I think he's in some sense a better substitute because he's going to put a bit more pressure on the starting team. I don't think the FaZe team in recent years were like, because Classic and, Pristini to a degree, they were known quantities. You know what they're going to do? They're going to be very good subs if you need them, but they're not going to be much more than that. You'll never necessarily, if you're a starter on that FaZe team a couple of years ago, fearing that Classic's going to come and take my spot. Whereas for Alluka, that's possible because we don't really know where he is. Now, like Mercules level players like Simp, they may only come along every 5 to 10 years. It's pretty unlikely that Alluka is going to be one of them. But it's not totally impossible, and the idea of bringing on a substitute to motivate the starting team to get better is viable if you pick the right substitute. So I think for FaZe, it makes a lot of sense, and as Zinni says, for OpTic it makes no sense, but the same logic for FaZe could have applied to a team like Thieves. But as we know, Aches, among others, were trying to convince Scrappy, and even Octane, right? Even Octane said he was on the phone to Rafi, presumably from Omid, to see if he could get something done, or at least see if there was interest, but Scrap wasn't so interested. And, you know, understandably so. At the end of the day, Thieves are paying a lot of money for their team, forking out another 50k to put a sub on the team. But I guess the idea is if you're already paying that much in salaries, then having someone else on the bench who can either motivate the starters or can potentially come in and do some damage and not go to a rival could be worthwhile in that scenario, right? So, yeah, true to your thoughts in the comments below. Conversations on substitutes in the league, always pretty interesting. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.